think that, when we're talking about countries in the Middle East, and even in the, so-called global South or developing world, it really depends on how robust or sizable the rural space is and the agricultural sector is, and even the political and socioeconomic dynamics in those areas. I think that, given the case of Iran, which has a sizable agricultural sector, this proved to be effective in terms of the revolutionary state during and after 1979, which was a legacy on the pre-revolutionary state under the Shah, really focused on the rural communities and villages and farmers and livestock holders in terms of trying to improve their lives as an important constituency of the revolution, and using state resources and capacities to deliver public goods and social services. So in some ways, at least on an absolute level, the Islamic Republic of Iran was able to improve the lives of villagers and farmers, etc. On the flip side, relative to cities and urban areas, we saw continued, even though living standards and economic conditions improved in villages, we saw a disparity between those conditions and standards with those in cities and urban areas. So the Islamic Republic, even though its stated goal was to try to mitigate rural to urban depopulation and migration, it was unable to do that and really narrow the gap, the development gap between cities and villages. And even there became increased ambiguities between rural and urban areas, even predating the revolution. And I think that Iran is not sui generis or exceptional in this regard, but that we see these disparities and issues existing in other parts of the not just the developing world, but even in the developed world. And so I think countries and states and governments are still trying to figure out how to deliver effectively goods and services to rural areas, how to improve the local economies there, and how to mitigate rural depopulation and rural to urban migration. Something that we're seeing as a global trend, and how it could put pressure on cities, on city infrastructure, on city goods and services, and really create with enough pressure some political and socioeconomic instability in urban areas. So I think this is despite what the Islamic Republic and other states have done over the last decades, I think we still see these challenges as being very real and daunting for many states. I think it's very difficult. I've looked most recently at the case of Iranian reconstruction and development activities during the civil war in Syria. And of course, we're now talking about a new regime or state or government there since a year ago, since December of 2024. But before that, and even outside of what Iran was doing in that area with reconstruction development and humanitarian aid efforts, even when we looked at other actors, internationally and regionally, we saw that was a major challenge, because that space was severely restricted by the Assad regime, with the exception of the northwest of the country, which was out of state control by and large, and of course the northeast as well, which the U.S. was occupying with Kurdish forces. But we saw that it became very difficult for international aid organizations to operate independently in that conflict zone, given that everything they had to go through the Syrian government. And as you indicated in your question, the Syrian government did everything in their power to try to control aid flows that were coming into the country, and even direct those aid flows to constituents that it saw as being loyal to the government, and to try to advance its own political interests, and to also try to maintain pressure and deprive segments of society and that were viewed as opposing the state or the regime. And we're even seeing this today in Gaza, for example, since late 2023, where the Israeli government and military has done everything in their power to control aid coming in and out of the territory, and even weaponizing it to the extent that there is not enough aid going in and leading to some highly detrimental, to say the least, outcomes in terms of starvation, malnutrition, disease. So we see, unfortunately, and I think that the international community is also experiencing issues delivering aid in other conflict zones like Sudan, which where aid is critically, urgently needed, time and time again, running up against these issues, and not to mention the role that non-state or quasi-state actors can play, whether it's Hamas in Gaza or whether it's the rapid support forces in Sudan that also obstruct aid or also can even try to get their hands on it to divert it to their own constituents and supporters. So the landscape becomes very complicated and challenging for humanitarian aid actors regionally and internationally to operate on the ground. Well, it's complicated. The concept of jihad, at least in the Iranian context, dating back to the 1979 revolution, really, I mean, again, they were doing very similar activities as the pre-revolutionary state under the Shah, as I'd mentioned earlier. But the Islamic Republic really rebranded reconstruction, development, and aid to rural areas and even outside, extraterritorially, in Africa, in Lebanon, in Syria, and elsewhere, using this concept of jihad in a non-military sense, in terms of an effort or struggle to improve society and the self. So basically a collective and individual effort to improve situations developmentally, again, by delivering services in the areas of infrastructure, in rural development, in agricultural assistance, in other areas. But of course, this was not done, and again, this is not too generous or exceptional to Iran, particularly reconstruction, development, and aid organizations that don't take a do-nontist approach, which means do no harm and basically being as impartial as possible, trying to get the reconstruction, development, and aid resources and services to those who need it the most. In the case of particularly governments like Iran and others, and even reconstruction, development, and aid actors that do not adopt the do-nontist approach, but may have other frameworks through which they operate and agendas, oftentimes the programs and services are not necessarily distributed to those who need it the most, but those who could fulfill some type of political or ideological agenda and help state actors, even non-state or quasi-state actors, because Hezbollah also adopted the same model using jihad as well to frame its reconstruction, development, and aid activities. Really targeting their as I mentioned earlier, their own constituencies to try to advance their own political and ideological interests. And so, as you indicated in your question, in this sense, reconstruction, development, and aid can be instrumentalized both to consolidate power for state and non-state or quasi-state actors, and also to operate, to have something to provide or use in an extraterritorial fashion to establish and expand relations with other actors and to strengthen alliances and partnerships outside of their territories, their territorial boundaries.